Hi. Today we're going to, and I want to try and keep these kind of quick, so why don't we go ahead and get started. Let me get my screen shared out here. All right, so what we're looking at here is the exam objectives for the RHCSA. Okay? And this should be your blueprint. This should be your guideline for studying for the exam. And as I scroll down here, can you execute all of these tasks? Are you comfortable with doing anything that happens to be on this particular list? Now, what I like to do is just kind of break this down into a punch list and just go one by one. And do I know how to do that? And if I don't, I teach myself how to do that and make sure that I'm comfortable doing that without any assistance from anything other than what I have on the local system before I go in to sit the exam. Now, today, I would like to talk about, and let's kind of scroll down here, under managing users and groups, we're going to talk about this objective right here. Configuring a system to use an existing authentication service for user and group information. So the way I read this, we have our system, and our system is going to be configured to use some type of external authentication service. Now, there are a variety of external authentication services that we could potentially be using. We're going to look at LDAP. Obviously, you could do like Kerberos authentication or LDAP authentication with Kerberos passwords and things like that. But for the sake of our demonstration, we're going to look at LDAP authentication. So what we need to do is we need to configure our system here to be able to authenticate user and group information stored on the authentication server. So you'll notice the objectives say that we have an existing authentication service. So we don't need to know how to configure an LDAP server. We don't know how to configure a Kerberos server and things like that. What we need to do is know how to use it. And so there has to be some information that they give us. They have to tell us, where this server is. Is this server using transport layer security, SSL or TLS? If it is, where can we find the certificate in order to use it? So if you know how to do the process, this is really what I call sort of a connect the dots or fill in the blank type of situation. If we know how to do it, the information that we need to do it has to be provided for us. We can't just guess where the authentication server is and things like that. And so if again, familiarize yourself with the process, and then you should be able to get through the question. If they do present this question, let's jump in and go ahead and take a look at the vocational piece, because obviously we need to know how to do the vocational piece. And there are really two ways that we can go about this. We can go about this through the CLI at the command line, or we can go about this using the GUI. So I'll show you how to use both of the tools, and then we'll review. So let me go ahead and first let's start with the graphical environment. So I'm gonna go ahead and get a SSH session going with my server, or well, server client, whatever we want to call it. All right, so the first thing is we're gonna need interactive sudo session here. Go ahead and get logged in. And the primary tool that we're going to need at the command line is going to be the auth config tool. So first thing I'm going to do is make sure that that is installed. It's typically part of the default installation. So it is installed. And then the other tool that I need is the NSS PAM LDAP. So let me go ahead and say yum list NSS PAM LDAP, and we'll see here that it is available through my local repository, but it is not installed on my system here. So I'm going to go ahead and just get that installed quickly. So yum install NSS PAM LDAP. Oh, what did I do? Oh. Said it right. I just didn't type it right. All right. So now I should have the appropriate software to get this done. All right. Now, if I run auth config with the -- help option, you'll see that I get a variety of pieces of information here. I'm really only interested in the LDAP output, so I'm going to go ahead and prep that for LDAP. And so you'll see that there's some options there: enable LDAP, enable LDAP authentication, LDAP server, LDAP base DN, and then all right. So I'll go ahead and type in auth config, and then just use the information that I have there. Obviously, I want to enable type today, enable LDAP. I want to enable LDAP authentication. My LDAP server. And again, this is where they have to give you information. You can't just guess at the LDAP server. And I'm going to go ahead and say LDAP. Now, if it was a secure LDAP server, I would say LDAP S. So I'm going to say LDAP, and then my server is out at ldap.nhls.com. Again, that has to be information that they provide to you. You can't necessarily guess that information. And then also on there, you'll see it says the LDAP base DN. Okay, so LDAP is LDAP really started as a protocol for accessing information from something called, the X.500 electronic directories, things like Novell's NDS and eDirectory and things like that. But LDAP has a hierarchy. And so often what you'll see here is you'll see at the top of the hierarchy something like DC equals com. DC just stands for domain object, and then why don't I go ahead and make this a little cleaner? DC equals NHLS, and then underneath that you might have a variety of different things that you could have, but you could have organizational units. OU equals people. OU equals groups, whatever it may be. And then I'll do one more in here. Let's just say CN, which is for common name. This is what we use for leaf objects. CN equals Ralph. Now with an LDAP name, okay, when you write out an LDAP name, the attribute identifiers, these things that we have right here, we call these attribute identifiers, are not optional. And the delimiter is a colon. So this name, fully qualified for Ralph, would be, for example, and let me type it in here, CN equals Ralph, comma, OU equals people, comma, DC equals NHLS, comma, DC equals com. Okay. So the base search, okay, is where are we starting the search? Okay, so this value for LDAP base domain is, and I'm going to say I'm going to start my search here, which means that it's going to search down through my LDAP directory for user and group objects from whatever I specify as the base domain. Okay, and so let me go ahead and add that information. And again, this has to be information that they give you. Okay, so as to not confuse it, I'm going to go ahead and quote that. So we say DC equals NHLS, comma, again, comma is the delimiter that we use with LDAP naming, and then DC equals com. Okay. And then I want to tell it to update the authentication information, so I'm going to say -- update. All right, looks good. let that update the information. We're going to have to restart one service in a minute here, and then we can go ahead and test it. Again, they typically will have to give you a username to test in the directory. So let's go ahead and do a system CTL restart, and then the NSL CD. Can't type today. .service. Now to test this, I'm going to go ahead and switch to a LDAP user. Okay, so I'll just go ahead and say SU to LDAP2. Again, this information I can't necessarily guess, but all right. Now, a couple things to note here. You'll notice that we get the warning message here. Okay, it says cannot change directory to home directory LDAP2. No such file or directory. Okay, so what happened here is that I authenticated successfully as a user. The user's home directory is LDAP, LDAP2. That directory doesn't exist on my system, and so I get an error there. But if I look at my ID, okay, you'll see that I am UID 2002. I am LDAP2. Okay, but I did get that error associated with the home directory. There's some different ways that we could clean up the home directory error. One is we could tell authconfig just to simply create the home directory for us. So I'm going to go ahead and exit back, and so I'm back at root now. And so I could say, you know, authconfig, and then enable make home directory, okay, and then update my authconfig information. Now this would create a situation where it would create the home directory automatically on the local system. And I've got an error. It's just enable MK home directory. It'll like me better now. So now if I try to SU over to LDAP, happen here is it creates a home directory for LDAP2. Okay, and so now if I print my working directory, you'll see there's home LDAP2. If I do an ls of home LDAP, you'll see, I can't get in there, but I don't have permission. Go back to root here, and I'll do an ls of home LDAP. You'll see there's LDAP2. If I SU out to LDAP3, which would be a different LDAP user. Now I'm not being prompted for a password because I'm root. You'll see here now if I ls home LDAP as part of switching to that user, a home directory got created for that user. So that's how you do it, through the command line using authconfig. Now, if you want to do this graphically, which would be another option, let me go out to a graphical connection. So let's go out to the server 2 GUI here. All right, now get myself logged in here. We're still going to need authconfig as a package. We're in the GUI, but I'm still going to manage a lot of this from the terminal. So let me go ahead and go out to root here, and let me verify that authconfig is in fact installed. All right, so we need a couple other packages. We need the authconfig GTK, and then again, we will need the NSS PAM LDAP. So I'm going to go ahead and install those. So I'm going to say yum -y install authconfig GTK, and also we're going to install the NSS PAM LDAP D. All right. All right, good. Those are installed. Now, there's a bunch of different ways that we could launch the auth config GTK. There should be now a menu in our applications. I don't really ever do it this way, so there I can find it. Okay, so there's authentication. Okay. That would be one option. I could run it right here, just say from the terminal, auth config GTK. I could also type in system config authentication. All of those are going to launch the same tool. So let's take a look here. Go ahead and launch it. And then you'll see here that since I want to do LDAP authentication, go ahead and select LDAP. Those are some other sources there: Winbind, Network Information Server, Free IPA. Now I'm going to change this. It's giving me issues about I'm missing packages because it wants to do a Kerberos password. So I change it back to an LDAP password and it likes me okay. For my search domain, I'm going to go ahead and use the same one I used before. So I'll say DC equals NHLS, comma, DC equals com. Again, this information they have to provide you. Our LDAP server is going to be LDAP ://LDAP.NHLS.com. Now, one of the things that that I've noticed here is that I don't have TLS configuration on my LDAP server. So what you'll see here is that there's this checkbox to use TLS, and if we check the box to use TLS, then we have to download a certificate. Again, that can't be a guessing game. They have to kind of give you the information on here's the location of the certificate. So let me do this. If I toggle this from a Kerberos password back to a LDAP password, now all of a sudden it likes me better. All right. It's not giving me a message about using encryption. So I'm going to go ahead and say apply here. And this is really committing the same changes that we did at the command line with auth config. Again, if you're using TLS, then you need a certificate. If you need a certificate, they have to tell you where to set that certificate, really. All right, so now let's try it. So I'm going to go ahead and say SU LDAP 3. We'll use LDAP 2. Sure, why not? And it worked. Of course, I've got the same problem I had on my other system. I'm getting the same error about home directories. Now, we looked at configuring, auth config to automatically create the home directories. There are, some other options for creating or connecting the users to their home directories. That's something that we'll save for another day. We'll talk about AutoFS and auto mounting remote users home directories and things like that. So those are really the two methods that you have. You can do this at the command line or you can do this graphically. You should probably know how to do both just in case you get asked about it on the exam. So wanted to try and keep this short, but with any of these topics, they do take a while to talk about. So I don't want to take up any more of your time, but hopefully that is a good tip for preparing for the RHCSA exam. Go ahead and stop my share here. All right. And I plan on pushing out these tips at a rate of about once a week. Some weeks I may be able to get a couple out. Other weeks I may not be able to, depending on the busyness in my schedule. But I hope that helped and hope to see you again.